Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. Today I'm doing a review of Update 25. Going to give my thoughts on the update, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and what I think could have been better. I'm going to start by saying I don't have a lot of these on my channel, but this is going to be a bit of a critical video. It's not that I don't like the game. I love the game still. I love DDO, but I felt this particular update could have been improved in a lot of ways, and I think it fell flat in a lot of areas. While I do love the game, and I don't want to bash on the developers too much because I know that the team is short-staffed, and I appreciate all the effort they do put into this game. But at the same time, I have to be honest on my channel. I'm always going to be honest. I'm always going to be blunt and straightforward and tell you guys exactly what I think. So with that said, let's start with the review. And I'll start with some positives, the good things. I really liked the Temple of Elemental Evil's dungeon in terms of the layout. The layout is huge. It's the biggest dungeon that DDO has ever had, and it was geared towards exploring, flower sniffing, getting that pen and paper exploratory feel. It feels like a dungeon crawl. It really does, and it feels like a classic pen and paper dungeon from the layout. And it's a lot of fun to go in there with friends and to casually run around and explore, look at all the nooks and crannies. I've done this myself. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I really like how they got Will Wheaton to DM. I think he did a fantastic job. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the bubbles that give you his history with pen and paper D&D. I thought it was a little out of place. I would like to see that outside the dungeon. But overall, it was really cool that Will Wheaton actually was convinced to do this. I don't know if he went to them or they went to Will Wheaton, but he's a pretty big star. I'm personally a huge Star Trek fan, big fan of Star Trek: The Next Generation, so I'm familiar with him, and I'm familiar with all the pen and paper stuff and all the other gaming stuff he does on his show, his internet show. So I was thrilled to see that, and I was hoping that this would generate some publicity for DDO, but it doesn't look like it has, but it's still really cool that a small, tiny niche MMO like DDO was able to get a guy like Will Wheaton to come in and participate and work on the game. Okay, now let's get to some things I didn't like about the Temple of Elemental Evil. First of all, there's only 2 quests in the whole update, and I know that the team is short-staffed. I know that the team has only gotten smaller, and these dungeons are huge. These are 2 monstrous quests, but still, a whole update for 2 quests. I would have liked to seen more. I would have even liked to see the temple split up more. I enjoyed going through the temple a couple times, but after that, I mean, it's so huge that I really don't want to run it that much. I'm not always in an exploring mood. Most of the time when I'm questing, I'm not wanting to flower sniff. So it doesn't have a lot of replay value in that regard. They could have easily split up the Temple of Elemental Evil into maybe 4 parts, so it would have been a little bit shorter. I didn't like that the temple has introduced yet another crafting system into the game. I don't think it was needed. I think that we have crafting fatigue right now in the game. I would have liked to see more fully completed items in the dungeon. Another thing I have to complain about as far as the loot is why more weapons? I don't understand why more weapons were introduced. We already have Thunderforged weapons. We have tons of different weapon systems. We're going to have more weapons when we have Epic Green Steel come out. So I don't think there's a place for more weapons, and I'm not going to say that I've tested out and run the math on every single weapon, but from what I've seen, what I've read, what my impression is just from looking at the loot, let me know if I'm wrong. I don't see these weapons as being more powerful than even a Tier 2 Thunderforged. And they're miles more difficult to get than Tier 2 Thunderforged. Anyone can just go to the auction house, buy ingredients. They're all over the auction house because of all the duping that went on. And they can buy Thunderforge ingredients, and they don't even have to run the raid, and they can get a tier 2 Thunderforge weapon. So why would you go through all the trouble of running the Temple of Elemental Evil repeatedly to get a weapon that's at best around the same power level as a tier 2 Thunderforge weapon, and as far as I know, it's not as strong as a tier 3 Thunderforge weapon. I'm assuming that because these new Temple of Elemental Evil weapons do not have Mortal Fear, and Mortal Fear is extremely powerful on melee weapons right now, and if an item doesn't have that, it's just not going to be as good as an item that does. That effect just does not scale well. And I'm going to be very surprised if they don't nerf that going forward before we get Epic Green Steel. Okay, so let's move on to puzzles. There were none. There was a couple. I know there's the frog dude at the beginning of the quest. You've got to go find some eggs and return it to him. But other than that, I didn't notice any other puzzle or encounters or anything really different in the temple as far as different in terms of encounters other than just a straight fight. I would have liked to see puzzles, like actual puzzles like we see in, say, Ghost of a Chance or Monastery of the Scorpion. Really cool puzzles like that. I would have liked to see some really awesome traps. We got no Eberron style traps in the temple. I thought that was a big takeaway from the pen and paper feel. Traps are a big part of pen and paper D&D. It's what a lot of people think about when they think of pen and paper. It's one of the top things you think about. And there are just no traps in this temple other than just simple copy and paste stuff like bear traps. I'm not talking about that. I want to see really cool inventive traps that just really stand out. Like I want to see a giant axes coming from the walls. I want to see darts. I want to see spinning blades, stuff like that. And we didn't get any of that. And because we had a lack of encounters, because there really was nothing in the dungeon other than just go through the dungeon, you kill a bunch of mobs, you move on to the next room, you kill more mobs. There's really nothing to break up the monotony. And I got kind of bored after a while. And actually, my first time, I've run this through a few times on Lamania, and actually my first run through on live, I got bored after about 20 minutes and I quit. Because I just got bored. There's just nothing to break up the monotony. I want more traps, more puzzles, more cool encounters, like we see in Necro 4 Wilderness area, in the King's Force Wilderness area, stuff like that. That's what I wanted to see. A lot of that stuff to break up the monotony of this dungeon, because with a dungeon this huge, you just have to have mix-ups in there. You have to. It's just too monotonous. Okay, and I want to talk about the loot again, and let's get away from the weapons and just talk about the rest of the loot. Now, just from looking at the loot and looking from what's in there, nothing in there really caught my eye. I didn't see anything that I felt I must have. There's nothing that I really wanted, quite frankly. To me, just looking at the gear, the Epic Necro 4 gear looks better overall. So why run it for that loot? I couldn't even see anything I wanted to replace my gear set with, any slot with, for my level 28 gear set. The minimum levels are too high, and they're just not. It's just the loot just isn't that appealing to me, and I think a lot of other people felt the same. Now, I'm not going to say it's unappealing for everybody. I'm sure that some players, especially new players or anyone who hasn't run a bunch of Epic Necro 4 will love some of this loot. But just me personally, I didn't like any of it. Nothing stood out to me as a must-have. So overall, I feel like I'm repeating the exact same thing I said in my Update 24 review video several months ago. I'll put a link in the description if you want to check that out. You know, overall, the update made the exact same mistakes that Update 24 did. It's content that did not have a niche. It has no place in the game. 95% of the time, players run quests for one of two reasons, or both reasons, XP or loot. The temple offers neither. Even if you're zerging it, XP per minute now I haven't zerged it a whole bunch, but from what I've read, from what I've seen, let me know if I'm wrong. It certainly doesn't seem the XP per minute is good. It certainly doesn't appear to me that the XP per minute is comparable to something like Spies in the House or any of those quests. And I don't think the XP per minute has to be the best for the Temple of Elemental Evil to be successful, but I think it needs to be competitive. And if you're not going to make the XP competitive and you want to make it loot focused, then the loot needs to be really good. And like I've said, the loot really wasn't that great. It wasn't that appealing to me, and I think a lot of other players felt the same. So overall, when we think of the two most important reasons that players run quests, XP and loot, the Temple of Elemental Evil fell flat in both, honestly. And the one thing is, it doesn't matter how well designed a dungeon is or how fun it is. If bottom line is, if it doesn't offer either good XP or good loot, it's not going to be run repeatedly. Now, fun is important, and the Temple of Elemental Evil, I'm sure it was a lot of fun for people once or twice through, but fun wears off, unlike XP and to a large extent loot. The fun wears off. After a few times running the Temple of Elemental Evil, it's going to get old. It's eventually going to get old. That wow factor is going to wear out. So to give it replay value, it needs to have XP and loot that's competitive. So now it's time for me to give the update a grade. I'm going to have to give it a C+. And devs, don't take this the wrong way. This is intended to be constructive criticism. I still love DDO, but the temple could have been a lot better, and I'm always honest in my channel. I'm always going to give my thoughts. I'm always going to be blunt about what I think. So I'd be lying if I said that the temple was a great success and that's an excellent quest, because I don't think it is. I think it fell short in a lot of areas. So in the future, to improve a quest like this, I want to see the dungeon filled out with more encounters, more puzzles, more things to do in the dungeon that aren't just straight up mob fights. And I want to see better loot and better XP. The developers are working on several of these things, the loot in particular, and I believe they mentioned on the forums lately that they're still looking into improving the XP possibly. So I hope the dungeon can be improved. I hope it's not going to be cut off and not worked on anymore. So guys, why don't you post below, let me know what you think about the Temple of Elemental Evil, if you agree with my review or if you don't. And as always, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe and tell your DDO friends and guildies about my channel. Thanks for watching.